تغییر یعنی اصلاحاتی که در سطح انجام میشه. فرض کنید یک شهری مردم در حال رفت آمدن، شما به این رفت آمد رو نظم بدید. مردم همونجا که قبلا میرفتن میرن، اما با یه نظم بالاتری. میشه تغییر، میشه یک رفرم و اصلاح. اما اگر کسی اومد شهرسازی رو جوری عوض کرد که اصلا مبدأ و مقصد مردم عوض شد، اون الگوی رفت آمد مردم به طور کلی عوض شد، میشه یه انقلاب. یه موقع شما کاری میکنی رفتار ظاهری مردم عوض میشه، میشه اصلاح و رفرم. یه موقع کاری میکنی شما مبنای فکری مردم عوض میشه، نظام ارزش‌های مردم عوض میشه، اصلا نگاهشون به دنیا یه چیز دیگه میشه. میشه یه انقلاب، یعنی مبناها عوض. انقلاب اسلامی مبناها رو در زندگی همه عوض کرد. البته ما هم به تبع تحت تاثیر بودیم. موفق باشید. شما پس برو کنار جلوی من. خیلی خوشحال شدم از ملاقات با شما. خیلی خوب با شما آشنا شدم. شنیدم رسانه شما خیلی منطقی و خیلی مستدل.
When do you return to Iran?
Don't translate.
فردا شب مبارک.
So tell him just to the president.
شما حواستون به من باشه. چه ترجمه کنم؟
Excuse me, can you tell the president not to speak to
Tomorrow night.
Just to look at them.
You speak very good English.
بلدم بله میگه انگلیسی صحبت میکنه. Yes.
Okay, just tell him not to say anything. We'll just talk to him for 1 second.
Just look.
باشه.
One. Just
Yes,
say
yes, yes.
anything.
They want us to act.
9.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Maybe someday I'll be able to say it in Farsi.
9,
1,
10.
2,
Thank you very
3.
much.
Okay, thank you.
I would ask, why is it that anyone tolerates a president like Ahmadinejad?
This is not the film you're about to watch. This film was made last year by a young Iranian Canadian filmmaker. That filmmaker was me. My name is Milad Dokhanchi. I came to Canada when I was a teenager. I was like any other immigrant, and I started to enjoy what I guess you can call Western freedoms. This new world got me so fascinated that I chose to study Western history at university. I was captivated by ideas like democracy, human rights, and liberty. I even became a student rights human activist. But just as fast as this new me started to take shape, the old Iranian me began to fade away. From my new home, I began to see my old home, Iran, in a different way. The media told me Iran was a repressive state with an authoritarian government. But then I would sometimes talk on the phone with my dad in Tehran. He would tell me a different story, but still, he couldn't be right. A view strongly, yet a strangely held. I graduated from university, worked as a journalist, and I remained confident in the Western paradigm. But then I saw this man, the controversial Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, the man the media loved to hate. He was speaking live on TV from Columbia University in New York. This speech got so many different reactions among my friends in Canada that encouraged me to make a documentary film, Mr. Ahmadinejad and Canadians. It wasn't that making the film revolutionized what I thought of Ahmadinejad, but one thing was for certain, I could no longer buy the images they attached to him in the West. I was invited to the screening of my film at the University of Toronto. Even though I had just completed a film about Ahmadinejad, I was still curious to know more about his views and policies and the context in which this controversial figure had emerged. After the screening, I got asked so many tough questions that it became clear to me that Canadians were also curious about Ahmadinejad. A journalist from a Dutch-funded Persian language radio channel asked me, "What is Ahmadinejad to you?"
انسانی هست به نظر من خیلی جنجالی و شما الکی جنجالی نمیشی اگر یک حرفی واسه گفتن نداشته باشه. اگه هیچی واسه گفتن نداشته جنجالی نمیشی. پس حتما یه حرف واسه گفتن داری. حالا اون حرف ما میتونیم باش مخالفت بکنیم، میتونیم باش موافق باشیم.
But what did Ahmadinejad have to offer? I didn't know the answer, so that became the topic of my next film. I wanted to make it in Tehran, but I had to keep it a secret. My friends tried to convince me not to go. They said it wasn't safe. American film director Oliver Stone had not been allowed to make a film about Ahmadinejad, so I kept a low profile until I had to let it out.
And here's the secret to reveal that I've actually contacted the administration of Ahmadinejad in Tehran and asked them if they would allow me to make a film about him in Tehran. Something that is I'm working on at this point. It's going to be really challenging. They've asked me to send out a proposal, which I have, and my take is really a Canadian take, that I've made this film about Mr. Ahmadinejad and the Canadians' perception of him. Now I want to come into Iran as an Iranian Canadian to explore who Ahmadinejad is.
I contacted the president's office in Tehran. A month later, they contacted me, and with none of the suspicious scrutiny I had been expecting, they offered me to take me on 1 or 2 of the president's trips around Iran. They said, "We welcome the coming of Iranians to Iran to explore the reality from close up." I was optimistic, and I was sure that with this kind of access and with Canada's freedom of speech, the Canadian media would help me to finance the project. I sent my proposal to a number of Canadian broadcasters. I wanted to give Canadians a closer account of the Iranian president. Happily, they all responded. Television of Ontario. Thank you, Milad. Good job for the access. However, we're not interested because your topic is not Canadian. Good luck with your project. CTV. Hi Milad, glad to hear from you. Unfortunately, we're not interested because this is a foreign story and not Canadian enough. Regards, CBC, supposedly the most liberal. Thank you, but not interested because our focus is on major issues of concern to Canadians. I'm sorry, and good luck with your project. It seemed to me that Canada was this distant island far away from any global affairs. But if Ahmadinejad was not a relevant story for the commission and editors of our liberal media, he was definitely a story to me. Learning about Ahmadinejad meant something more than just reattaching myself to my Iranian identity. It meant understanding the current global order and the way Iran is helping to shape it. I wondered why it was that Ahmadinejad was perceived to be so irrational for taking a firm stand towards the West. I wondered why it was that the Iranian president should be so engaged with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict while it had nothing to do directly with Iran. I wondered where it was that Ahmadinejad got his support when, from what I had heard, young Iranians were so apathetic about politics. With all these questions and no support, I left Canada. Here I was after almost a decade. My father and sister were there to welcome me. But more than these hugs, I had a feeling that I'd returned to a land that I belonged to, and it was clear that I had a lot to learn and discover. What struck me first was Iran's modern face. It was totally in contrast with the images I had in mind. Traditions were held in high regard, but modernity, like a cute little kid, was blessed, kissed, and played with by everyone. It was hard for me to understand, given what I knew about Iran's harsh stance against the West. After all, modernity is a Western phenomenon, but Iran seemed to have no problem with it. While I was waiting to hear from the president's office about our first trip, I spoke to ordinary Iranians about issues ranging from Ahmadinejad and the current Iranian government to Iranian views of President Obama. One thing was evident. It was clear that Iran was very diverse, and that sense of authoritarian rule that I had been expecting wasn't there at all. You could hear all kinds of perspectives from people who apparently had no fear of expressing them, and people lived peacefully alongside one another, and there was no sign of ethnic or religious conflict. While I was busy making sense of Ahmadinejad's Iran, I was lucky enough to meet with a British journalist working in Tehran. She had organized an interview with 2 young Iranian students, each from quite different extremes of the current Iranian political spectrum. Shima was a master's student studying fine arts. On the whole, she agreed with the current political ideology of the Iranian government. Vahid was quite reversed. A reformist, he sounded dissatisfied. He was studying political science and had taken part in anti-government rallies at Tehran University. His views were a strong contrast with Shima's.
What does it mean to be an Iranian? من خواهش میکنم. شخصا برای خود من خیلی هیجان انگیزه. یعنی به نظر من زندگی کردن توی ایران امروز، ایرانی که در یک دوره گذار میتونم حالا دیگه بگم طولانی به سر برده ولی چشمانداز بسیار روشنی پیش روشه، برای خود من خیلی هیجان انگیزه.
موافقی؟
نه خیلی از شما مخالفم. فکر میکنم که از نظر من ایرانی بودن امروز یعنی یه حسرت، یه ریگرت. حداقل چیزی که من تصور میکنم اینه که ایرانی داره یک تحقیری رو تحمل میکنه وقتی میره توی فرودگاه‌های اکثر کشورهای جهان و وقتی میگن ایرانیه و همه فکر میکنن یه تروریست الان اومده و همه میپان که حالا مراقب باشن یه اخبار نشته باشه فلان نباشه. این یه تحقیره.
How would you define democracy and would you say Iran can be considered a democratic state?
این بسته به این داره که چقدر بخوایم المان‌های دموکراسی رو تاف بگیریم دیگه، یعنی چقدر سفت و سخت نگاه بکنیم. این کاملا نسبی میشه در این مورد حرف زد. یعنی به اعتقاد من اگر اون معیار اون باشه که 50% به علاوه یک مردم یه چیزی رو بخوام و اون محقق باشه، معتقدم ایران دموکراتیک نیست.
دموکراسی به نظر من تعریف خیلی محدودیه. دموکراسی که در آتن 2500 سال پیش از اینم دموکراسی واقعی نبود، چون نه برده‌ها اونجا حق رأی داشتن، نه زن‌ها و نه غیر آتنی‌ها. ولی من واقعا بدون هیچ تعصبی واقعا وقتی نگاه میکنم به ماجرا احساس میکنم که توی ایران امروز یه چیزی جریان داره که به نظر من اون خیلی به اون آزادی انسانی شبیه. من میخوام بگم چطور یه همچین جامعه پیچیده رو میشه با مفاهیم واقعا نخنما شده مثل دموکراسی که امروز دیگه در خود مهد شکلگیری دموکراسی همین دموکراسی قابل اعتنا و اتکا نیست، چطور میشه همچین جامعه عجیب و غریبی رو تحلیل کرد و بعد مثلا خیلی راحت حکم بدیم که نه ما دموکراسی نداریم.
Though their views were radically different, I was impressed by how much respect and tolerance they showed each other. And on this note, I had to agree with Shima.
برداشت‌های ایرانی‌ها متفاوته ولی در ظاهر به نظر من میاد که هممون یه چیزایی رو کشف می‌کنیم، یه سیگنال‌های واحدی رو از اطرافمون می‌گیریم.
To me, Shima and Wahid were connected by an invisible line. Although their take on the issue seemed totally different, I listened carefully and I realized there were three things about which both Shima and Wahid were very close. Both of them were suspicious towards the West.
When Bush was threatened to attack Iran, would you say that was an opportunity for a democracy to be established?
حمله و به اصطلاح دخالتی که به معنایی که شما دارید میگید، نه، من فکر میکنم که بوش یک فرصتی رو از ما گرفت و خیلی جدی بوش روند دموکراسی رو در ایران به خطر انداخت با نطق محور شرارتش. بعد این حمله ها موجب شده که بیگانه هراسی تو ایران شکل بگیره که این به یه نوعی همون حالا در واقع وحدت ملی‌گرایانه میشه گفتش.
اصلا به خاطر اون گذشته، اون ایرانیت تاریخی و تمدنی که ما داریم، اهل به زور پذیرفتن هیچ مفهومی، هیچ کانسپتی نیستیم.
Second, both Shima and Wahid, like all Iranians, were proud of their culture and historical roots. Both of them defined the modern Iranian struggle as an effort to revive the spirit of their Persian heritage, even on a global level.
ایران یه سابقه مثلا 2500 ساله نمیدونم چند ساله خیلی یه قدمتی داره، یه تاریخ بلنده، یه تمدن، یه فرهنگه که کوروش داریوشه، منشور حقوق بشر کوروشه. مسلماً این ایرانی بودن برای یه افتخار
و یه ویژگی هم که باز تو ایران وجود داره اینه که خیلی از ویژگی‌های فرهنگی قومی ما در طول تاریخ به ما رسیده، یعنی همین امروز در دوران معاصر ما باهاشون در واقع زندگی می‌کنیم. برامون مهمه که بدونیم چقدر میتونیم اون پیشینه تاریخی اعتقادی رو با خودمون از این دوران گذار عبور بدیم و به مرحله دیگه‌ای برسونیم.
And thirdly, Shima and Wahid both kept talking about the idea of their people or the nation. I'd never heard of my Canadian friends using that kind of language when they talked about national or international politics. It was obvious that Shima had a special kind of trust of the Iranian people, and Wahid's ideas about the rule of the people and democracy were something similar.
در ایران یک کلیت واحدی به اسم مردم ایران داریم که اون واقعا اصلا با دو تا چهار تاهای سیاسی جور در نمیاد و به خاطر همینه که اعتقاد دارم. من به مردم ایران خیلی اعتقاد دارم. احساس میکنم که مردم ایران یه چیزی دارن که اصلا نه فقط دولت مردای خودمون متوجهش نشدن هنوز، اساسا برای جهان ناشناخته است.
In a way, I felt jealous of Shima and Wahid and of the way they drew on Iran's contemporary history to back up their ideas. So I went to a local library and tried to put Wahid and Shima's views in perspective, and when I got confused, I had my dad to guide me.